I'm very pleased with what I managed to achieve this week. A mid-range PC that holds its head above water in every scenario in early 2022. Best of all, this is all part of a planned crescendo of PCs, this being the first. I agonized whether or not to start with a 1660 or 3050 build, but I eventually decided to do him in series order. This GTX 1070 from the Pascal generation is the first one to go up. As I start building, I'll give more details regarding the components used, but first we need to fit this Corsair VS650 power supply into the Corsair case we'll be using today. The I/O shield needs to go in place. Thankfully, these things are a dying breed and I for one can't wait for the day they are completely obsolete. Then comes one of my all-time favorite motherboards, this fully dressed B450 Tomahawk Max. Because this thing exists, I believe it negates the reason for most X470 boards. As you go crazy high-end like the ROG Crosshair 7, then this model will most likely be the better choice. Accompanying it is a Ryzen 7 2700X processor and 16GB of 3200 Mbps DDR4 RAM, again from Corsair. I did consider 32GB, but I still don't see the point of that for gaming. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward all the screw installation, but please keep in mind that if a screw doesn't go in smoothly, don't try to cross-thread it. You will most likely regret it. Don't worry, this is just a test fit, so that is why there is no thermal paste on top of the CPU. I'm a firmly radiator on top kind of dude, so I'm just putting everything together loosely to make sure it fits. As we shall see, there really isn't even a millimeter of error here. In order to get the RAM out, you really need to get the fans out first, otherwise there's no chance. I'm going to be installing some brand new quality RGB fans for this build. I really think it deserves it. In hindsight, I would have probably chosen the black shrouded fans, as I thought the white will provide a nice reflective surface in an otherwise black PC. It looked a bit odd, so to fix it I put an RGB strip around the case's periphery that made the look really come together. Anyway, as you can see, mounting the second fan is crazy tight, so I decided to ditch the preliminary placement and go for it. I used Arctic MX5, which is a good high performance thermal compound, and liberally applied it. I still refuse to spread it. The CPU doesn't have a bare die, so the pressure from the cooler mount will do just fine. The last fan quickly goes in and it's time for the start of the show, but before that, what I almost forgot to mention is that there is a 500GB SSD and a 500GB hard drive mounted at the back of the case. Finally, this MSI GPU goes in. This cooler was used on multiple graphics cards of the generation, including the top dog 1080 Ti, so it's a bit overkill for 1070, making it whisper quiet. Actually, come to think of it, this entire build is ridiculously quiet no matter the circumstance. I personally think it even looks great. Have a look at some of the pictures and judge for yourself. Start as per usual with Heaven, that is a very GPU heavy benchmark despite its age. This is my sort of canary in the coal mine benchmark for the GPU, as it's specifically designed to tax it to the maximum and the rest of the system as little as possible. If something is wrong, this will usually show it by posting a lower than expected score. This time though, we end up exactly where I would expect a 1070 to be, far ahead of a 1060 and just below 1080. A little fun tidbit here, the new 3050 sits somewhere between a 1060 and 1070 in this benchmark. Stay tuned because that video is coming soon, the benchmarks are already. Superposition is a much newer benchmark, but it's built by the same people who brought you Heaven, so it's still designed to stress the GPU but not much else. Again, we get a good score and a great 70 FPS on average, so confirmation that all is well. At this point I will do an overclocking pass, but this whole PC is so quiet and fast I simply don't feel it is required. Not yet anyway. Rocket League is the first actual game we will be looking at today, and as you can see at maximum settings it gyrates between 300 and 440 FPS, so there is little point in trying to optimize the settings as it runs incredibly well. One thing I will mention here is that this game, from one version to the next, its relationship with AMD processors changes. This time it's the best of friends with the 2700X, while similar benchmarks done on previous versions just didn't want to go above 200 FPS or so. More than enough that it makes no real world difference, but I'm just pointing out that this game has received updates of varying quality in the past. In Fortnite at 1080p with everything set to epic, you'll mostly stay above 60 FPS no matter the situation. If you have a 60 or 75Hz monitor, I would suggest just enabling VSync and calling it a day. But if you have a higher refresh rate monitor, then it's well worth dropping down to medium settings with epic draw distance and 100% render scale, as this will push the average to over 130 FPS. There are some stutters here and there, but they are minor and caused by the game engine rather than the hardware. Horizon Zero Dawn at favored quality returns 75 FPS on average in the included benchmarking for a very fluid gaming experience. You can go with ultimate quality and still be above 60 FPS here without any worries depending on your preferences. For the most part, in actual gameplay the average will be much higher anyway. Assassin's Creed Valhalla just received a giant patch that required the complete game re-download, so I'm not sure how much this qualifies as a patch as it's more of an overhaul. Toxically, this shrunk the game by over 30 GB while improving performance and visuals, but the downside being that it is no longer appropriate to compare the new and old versions of the game. Everything set to high, the 1070 returned a very respectable 63 FPS, and in a game geared towards exploration in a gorgeous looking fictional England, that is plenty. Gone is running very well indeed with over 80 FPS on average on high settings, so I went ahead and upped it to very high. That should kinda say it all really, because very high in this game is only there for bragging rights, I feel. There isn't any reason to enable it unless it's already running very well, so there's absolutely no harm in doing it. Oh yeah, so we're still averaging over 60 FPS, so we're all good. I really like this new generation of upscaling technologies, with both FSR and DLSS getting the thumbs up from me. Yes, they can introduce artifacts, but I find that in most cases, and especially for the vast majority of users, the trade-off is very much worth it. FSR set to ultra quality and everything else set to ultra, we get a very respectable 71 FPS in a brand new title. It's a series that is still inexplicably limited by single core CPU frequency, but the 2700X does very well here indeed. For everyone else that thinks that shimmering artifacts are the work of the devil, Farcry sans FSR with ultra settings still returned a very respectable 62 FPS. Because I still don't particularly like playing Warzone, I let it choose its own settings and play through the training mission where I got 96 FPS on average. This will surely appease most gamers and afford the option of tweaking the settings up or down depending on the monitor and the playstyle. I do find the default settings for this configuration a bit baffling, because with a bit of care you can go 144 plus FPS without a noticeable decrease in quality, but because I don't habitually play this title, I'm inclined to just go with whatever he recommends. Cyberpunk, with everything set to ultra minus the RT features that are not supported, gives us a borderline incredible 54 FPS on worst case scenario downtown driving. Dropping to high settings you'll be very close to 60 FPS, and with a few very minor tweaks that can be surpassed easily. Sure, you can go down to medium or low and for the most part it will scale linearly, but why would you? You're gonna lose so much of the experience. Possibly more impressive though is that this game is usually a GPU melter that also holistically taxes the system it's running on. So when I did not notice any uptick in fan noise, I was borderline shocked, because by this point the vast majority of systems start screaming, but not this one. The MSI card employed here utilized the same cooler that was present on 1080 Ti, so it's incredibly overspec'd and it's only running its fans at about 45% capacity. Plus that 240mm cooler on the CPU effortlessly handles its heat output without any overclocking, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of room for overclocking as well. Bonus round this time was Forza Horizon 5 that is running in the benchmark mode at high settings. This one is a good looking game and it's running very smoothly here, pushing around 84 FPS on average, with the GPU being the clear bottleneck as it should be. I then noticed that the suggested preset is ultra, so I went ahead and set it to extreme just to see a slideshow. The 52 FPS average returned actually made me gasp a bit. No frame rate fluctuations and no issues at all. Again reaffirming what a beast the 1070 was at launch, considering just how well it's holding up almost 6 years later, beating a newly released 250 pound card in a Formula 3050 in most scenarios. And that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next one.